When sentencing Muhammad Muvasagi for having a party, see the link in the notes below, BC Provincial Court Judge Ellen Gordon said,
If someone who had been at your party was infected and died, as far as I'm concerned, you're guilty of manslaughter. If someone who had been at your party was infected and passed it on to grandma, as far as I'm concerned, you're guilty of manslaughter.
we know that people die from the seasonal flu every year, and that it is, theoretically, passed on the same way as the Coof. The judge's words are thus equally applicable to all parties during any flu season. As Warren Buffett said, only when the tide goes out do you discover who's been swimming naked. The Wu flu panic has given those of us with eyes to see the opportunity to see that even judges and health bureaucrats can have rocks in their heads. We also know that other communicable diseases are passed around at parties too, such as sexually transmitted infections or STIs. I don't know whether anyone at that party is likely to have passed an STI to their grandmas, but the WHO says
Estimated is key. I-related mortality includes 200,000 fetal and neonatal deaths each year due to syphilis in pregnancy, and over 280,000 cervical cancer deaths each year due to HPV.
do the math. How many life years do 200,000 fetal and neonatal deaths represent? Average global life expectancy, according to Worldometer, is 73.2 years, which is equivalent to 14,640,000 life years lost to fetal and neonatal mortality from STIs. Since the average age of death of those who succumb to the Wu flu is over 70 years, the number of life years lost from Wu flu hovers around zero on a global basis. In terms of life years lost, the Wu flu doesn't hold a candle to STIs. Many people drive to parties in cars. They could be involved in fatal accidents. We know that for younger people, the risk of dying from the Coof are less than the risk of dying in a car accident, and so on and so on. If we go by this judge's words, anyone who ever had a party is potentially guilty of manslaughter. The same standard is also applicable to bars, theaters, amusement parks, or Walmarts. Since the judge failed to establish any thresholds applicable to deaths from parties due to transmission of diseases, then, logically, according to her own standards, no one should ever be allowed to have any fun from now on. This judge obviously lacks any capacity for contextual thinking. Either she is blissfully unaware of the implications of her comments, or she is a typical liberal, which says pretty much the same thing. Sensible people know that there is no such thing as a risk-free existence. Every individual has the right to do their own risk assessments and to live accordingly. That is why some people go skydiving, while others would rather sit at home and watch other people do it on YouTube. The same type of calculus goes into the decision of whether or not to wear a mask while driving or lounging around the house. Grandmas who risk being infected by younger relatives have every right to avoid any kind of physical contact with them. When you see the utter buffoonery politicians have engaged in, always engage in, why on earth would anyone want to socialize their risk tolerances? Free people have the right to make their own decisions regarding the level of risk they're willing to expose themselves to. As we have seen and are continuing to see, the collateral damage from jackboot medicine, as it has been applied all across the globe, is orders of magnitude higher than even the most optimistic estimates of life years saved by lockdowns and mandates, which themselves may end up having saved no lives at all, even from the Coof. As Benjamin Franklin famously said, any society that will give up a little liberty to gain a little security will deserve neither and lose both. Given the level of sheep-like compliance I've seen all over the so-called free world in response to this historic panic, I'm not very optimistic about our future. Swinging on the